My husband begged me to avoid his private retreat. When he passed away, I unlocked it and found. The last thing my husband ever asked of me was a promise I didn't understand. Naomi, don't go to the retreat, David whispered, fingers cold but still clinging to mine. Promise me you'll stay away from that place. I nodded, because what else do you do when the person you love is fading in front of you? His eyes searched my face one last time, making sure I meant it. I didn't know what house he was talking about, or why it mattered, but I gave him my word anyway. 17 years of marriage ended under the harsh lights of a hospital room after a sudden stroke no one had seen coming. At 58, I became a widow with a daughter in college, a closet full of his shirts that still smelled like him, and a hollow space inside me that nothing touched. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Life kept moving. Bills arrived. Classes at the university resumed. People asked polite questions and expected me to eventually stop talking about him. I pretended to go along with it while the world marched on. 2 months after the funeral, David's attorney called. "Mrs. Sterling, could you come by my office? There's something your husband left in my care," Mr. Harrison said, his voice unusually formal. His office smelled faintly of leather and dust. He slid a small box and a sealed envelope across his polished desk. "Your husband gave very specific instructions," he explained. "These were to be given to you only after his passing." The box was heavier than it looked. Inside was a large antique key attached to a delicate metal keychain shaped like a leaf. The envelope had my name on it in David's familiar, steady handwriting. "What is this for?" I asked, holding the key up so it caught the light. "It belongs to a property in Lake Arrowhead," Mr. Harrison replied. "Your husband purchased it about 4 years ago. It's called Crestwood Estate. Apparently, he lived there as a child. He acquired it as an adult." I stared at him. That can't be right. David never talked about owning another house. And he hated talking about his childhood. Whenever Lake Arrowhead came up, he'd shut down. "Mrs. Sterling," the attorney continued gently, "there's more. In the last 2 years, the land has become extremely valuable. A company called Summit Resorts is building a luxury development in the area. Crestwood sits in a very strategic spot. Your husband received several multi-million-dollar offers. None of this matched the man I knew. David had been a careful, mid-level engineer. We lived comfortably but modestly. We never had secret vacation houses or surprise fortunes. And yet, the key lay in my hand, solid and real. My fingers shook as I opened the envelope. "My dearest Naomi, if you're reading this, it means I ran out of time earlier than I hoped. I'm sorry for the parts of me I kept hidden. Crestwood is yours now. The house was a dark place from my childhood. I spent years trying to forget it. But for the last 4 years, I've been rebuilding it into something different, something I hope you'll find beautiful. I know I made you promise not to go there. I'm canceling that promise. I want you to see it. Go once before you decide what to do. In the study, you'll find my laptop. The password is the date of our first meeting followed by the word you taught me to feel again. Hope. I love you more than I ever said out loud. David." I pressed the letter to my chest. Even dead, he still had a way of knocking the air out of me. "I need to see this place," I murmured. "There is a complication," Mr. Harrison added. "Your husband's brothers are contesting the will. They claim David wasn't mentally competent when he bought the property." I almost laughed at the absurdity. David was meticulous to the end. He didn't make impulsive decisions. "Even so, they've already filed the paperwork," he said. "Given the current value of the land, this could get very ugly." I slipped the key into my pocket and stood. "Let it get ugly," I replied quietly. "I'm going to Lake Arrowhead." 2 days later, after hours of winding mountain roads, I stopped in front of an old wooden gate with Crestwood Estate, worked in wrought iron across the top. My stomach tightened as I slid the key into the lock. The gate opened with a soft groan, and for the first time, I saw what David had hidden from me. It wasn't a quaint cottage tucked in the woods. It was a stone and timber manor surrounded by manicured gardens, ancient oaks, and a long flagstone path leading to double doors. The place looked recently restored. Neat hedges, fresh stain on the wood, not a trace of neglect. If this had been the setting of his worst memories, he'd spent a fortune rewriting them. The front door accepted the same key. I stepped into a soaring entry hall and nearly grabbed the frame to stay upright. A grand living room stretched out in front of me with a towering stone fireplace. But it wasn't the architecture that made my throat close. Every wall held paintings. Not landscapes or family portraits, but flowers, orchids. Hundreds of them. Every shape, every shade. White, purple, yellow, spotted. Exotic varieties I recognized from years of reading about them, and others I'd only ever seen in books. My lifelong obsession, the hobby David had always quietly encouraged, covered the walls like a museum curated just for me. On a table by a wide window, a silver laptop waited. Someone had placed a single white orchid on top of it like a quiet invitation. I took a step toward it, and heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Through the front window, a black SUV rolled up behind my car. 3 men got out, all sharing versions of David's face. The same bone structure, the same eyes, just filtered through different ages and lifestyles. The Sterling brothers. Their expressions told me everything I needed to know. They weren't here to welcome their brother's widow or offer condolences. They were here for the land. I shut the door and backed away, heart pounding. Mrs. Naomi? A sharp knock rattled the wood. This is Marcus Sterling. We need to talk about the property. I didn't answer. David had never said much about his brothers, but whenever their names came up, his jaw tightened and his voice went flat. I had learned not to ask. The pounding grew more impatient. Naomi, open the door. I'm Marcus. This is Elijah and Isaiah. We're family. They were strangers with my husband's features and a lawyer's timing. I turned away from the door and went to the laptop. My fingers hovered over the keys as their muffled voices murmured outside. Date of our first meeting. October 12th, 96 Hope. I typed it in. The screen lit up. One main folder stared back at me. For Naomi. Inside, hundreds of video files, each labeled with a date. The timeline started the day after his funeral and continued daily for a full year. I clicked the first one. David's face filled the screen, healthy, relaxed, and very much alive. Not the slack, exhausted version I'd watched struggle for breath in a hospital bed. This was the man I'd fallen in love with. "Hi, my love," he said, smiling crookedly in that way that always undid me. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone and you've ignored my years of insisting you stay away from Crestwood. Honestly, I'm not surprised." I laughed and sobbed at the same time. "I recorded one message for every day of your first year without me," he continued. "Think of them as companies, explanations, things I should have told you while I was still there to hold your hand." Outside, the banging stopped. I saw the men pacing near the porch, talking on their phones, spreading papers over the hood of the SUV. "Let's start with the part you're probably furious about," David said, eyes steady. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with a brain aneurysm, a ticking bomb I inherited from my father. The doctors gave me 2 to 5 years. I froze. "I didn't tell you or Chloe," he went on quietly. "Not because I didn't trust you, but because I couldn't stand the idea of being treated like a patient instead of a husband and father. I wanted everyday life, not a countdown." Anger flared hot in my chest even as I clung to the sound of his voice. He had made a life-changing decision for both of us without ever asking me. "I know you're mad right now," he said, almost amused. "You have every right. But I hope one day you'll understand why I did it." He leaned back. "When I got that diagnosis, I decided to spend whatever time I had left building something for you. The obvious answer would have been a nice vacation home somewhere warm. Instead, I did something no one expected. I came back here." On the screen, He nodded toward the walls around him. This used to be the house I ran from at 18, he said. Our father gambled away everything. My brothers helped strip the place for cash, and I left vowing never to return. Years later, he was broke enough to sell me the property for almost nothing. On one condition: I couldn't tell my brothers he'd cut them out. Outside, one of the men held a document up to the sidelight window, trying to get my attention. Another made a call, his expression turning smug as he hung up. They're going to come after this house, David said calmly in the video. They didn't care about it until the resort plans surfaced. Now that it's worth serious money, they'll behave like they've loved it all along. He paused. In the bottom drawer of the table where you found the laptop, there's a blue folder. Everything you need is inside: purchase records, bank transfers, notarized statements. The place is yours legally, Naomi. I made certain. As if on cue, another vehicle turned into the driveway on the live side of the window, a county patrol car. The officer stepped out, adjusting his belt. The brothers greeted him with self-assured nods. One more thing, David added. Behind the house, you'll find a glass-walled conservatory. I spent years tracking down rare orchids for you. Whether you decide to live here, sell, or burn it all down, those flowers are my last gift. The video ended as someone knocked again, firmer this time. County officer, a voice called. Mrs. Sterling, would you open the door, please? I closed the laptop, grabbed the blue folder, and went to meet the mess my husband had predicted so precisely. The officer standing on the porch looked barely old enough to rent a car. He glanced between me and the three men crowding the steps behind him. Mrs. Sterling, he asked. I'm Officer Davis. These gentlemen have a court order requesting an inspection of the property related to an inheritance dispute. Marcus wore an expression of practiced concern. Naomi, this doesn't have to be adversarial. We just need transparency. My brother's mental state in his last years is in question. My grip on the blue folder tightened. I understand, officer, I said evenly. Before anyone sets foot past this threshold, I think you should see these. I handed him the folder. Marcus tried to wedge himself between us. Officer, this is a complicated family situation. My sister-in-law is grieving and... I am grieving, I cut in, but I'm not confused. I'm a widow standing in a house my husband legally purchased, facing three men who only remembered it existed when it became valuable. The deputy glanced over the documents. The deed, the sale contract from their father, notarized signatures, and proof of payment. These appear valid, he said finally. Everything here indicates clear transfer to Mr. David Sterling and, upon his death, to his wife. He turned to the brothers. I can't justify forcing an inspection today. This looks like a civil court matter. Marcus went red. This is outrageous. That woman has no right. That woman, I said quietly, is David Sterling's wife. You'll address me as such or you'll leave. They had no choice but to retreat for the day, though Marcus muttered something about talking to our lawyers, and this isn't over, as they stomped back to the SUV. When the patrol car and black SUV disappeared down the drive, the house was suddenly too quiet. Only the soft hum of the heating system and the faint ticking of a grandfather clock echoed in the grand room. I spent the night in David's secret house, pacing through rooms that felt both familiar and foreign. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face on the laptop screen. At dawn, I finally explored properly. The main house was a careful blend of old beams and modern glass. The library shelves held the same authors that filled our home office back in the city, just more of them, and in first editions. There was a reading nook beside a window that looked out over the grounds. I could see myself there on foggy mornings with a mug of tea and a novel. And then, I found the conservatory. A glass-roofed space stretched out behind the house, humidity kissing my cheeks when I walked in. Rows of orchids, more varieties than I could count, filled benches and hanging racks. Some of them were so rare I'd only ever seen them in horticulture journals. One in particular drew me, a blue-tinted cattleya blooming proudly in the center. "Morning, ma'am," a voice said behind me. I turned to see a woman in her 50s, work gloves on, spray bottle in hand. "You must be Mrs. Sterling." "I'm Ms. Jackson. Your husband hired me to maintain the orchids and oversee the grounds." "Naomi," I said faintly, extending my hand. "You knew David?" "As much as anyone he allowed close," she replied gently. "He was here at least once a month for the last 4 years. Always with plans. Always with sketches and lists." She followed my gaze. "That one," she nodded toward the blue orchid, "took him almost 2 years to track down. Said you'd once admired something similar at a flower show and never forgotten it." My chest ached. The Atlanta Botanical Garden Show. 10 years earlier. I'd mentioned that particular orchid exactly once. "Did he ever mention his health?" I asked cautiously. Her expression darkened. "Not directly," she said. "But in the last several months he worked like a man sprinting against a clock. He was exhausted sometimes, but he refused to slow down." That matched the subtle urgency I'd noticed in him those last 2 years. The way he insisted on updating our wills, the sudden rush to finish small home projects, the new habit of taking photos during ordinary dinners. I'd called it a midlife nesting phase. I wandered back to the main house and opened that day's video. David appeared again, this time sitting in a room I hadn't yet found. Walls bare, windows huge. "Good morning, love," he said. "I hope you slept in our new bed instead of on a random couch. Today, I want to show you something special." He picked up the camera and walked through the house, down a corridor, to a door at the far end. "This room is yours," he said, setting the device down so I could see him unlock it. "The key is in the top drawer of your nightstand, the silver one with the orchid engraved on it." I paused the video, went straight to the bedroom, and opened the drawer. The key lay exactly where he'd said, cool against my palm. Following the path he'd shown, I found the door in the east wing. The lock turned smoothly. When I pushed it open, I stopped breathing for a moment. An art studio stretched out in front of me. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the space with light. Easels stood waiting, canvases leaned against the wall, brushes and paints and palettes lined a long table. Sketchbooks, reference photos, and art books were neatly stacked on shelves. I hadn't painted seriously in 15 years. Art school had been my first dream. Life had steered me toward teaching literature instead, a practical decision when Chloe was born and the bills piled up. Painting became something I used to do, like a language you forget from lack of use. David's voice floated from the laptop in my hand. "You gave up a lot for us, Naomi," he said. "You never complained, but I saw it. I promised myself that one day, if I could, I'd give that part of you back." He smiled, then nodded toward something off-screen. "Check the built-in cabinet under the window bench." There, behind a cushion, I found a flat archival box. Inside were paintings I hadn't seen in years. My college pieces, my early experiments, even my final self-portrait project. Work I was sure had been lost in moves and decluttering. He had saved them all. A note lay on top of the self-portrait. "She's still there," it read in David's handwriting. "The girl who painted this. This room is my invitation for her to come back." I pressed the little card against my chest, swallowed hard, and almost missed the sound of cars crunching up the drive. 2 SUVs. 1 black. The brothers. 1 silver. My daughters. Chloe stepped out of the second car with the ease of someone arriving at a friend's house, not a battlefield. She walked straight over to her uncle's, laughing at something Marcus said. A text came through on my phone. "I'm here with Uncle Marcus and the guys. Coming in. We need to talk." Uncle. In less than 48 hours, they had gone from strangers to family in her vocabulary. I wiped my face, straightened my shirt, and went to meet them, trying to ignore the feeling that I was walking into an ambush. They followed Chloe into the house like they owned the place. "Mom, this place is unbelievable," Chloe said, spinning slowly to take in the high ceilings and paintings. Why did Dad never tell us about it? A fair question I couldn't answer honestly. Because he was sick and building a secret goodbye sounded like a cruel punchline. Marcus stepped forward with a smooth smile. Naomi, he said, tone practiced and warm. I think yesterday started badly. We were all caught off guard. Let's try again. He put a gentle hand on Chloe's shoulder like he'd known her for years. We've been talking, she said quickly. They explained everything. This house has been in the family forever. Grandpa wanted it to belong to all the brothers. Dad just handled the paperwork first. That's how they'd framed it. Not a legal sale, but a temporary holding. Elijah has a settlement proposal, Marcus added. Something fair. Elijah opened his leather folder like a magician revealing a trick. 1/3 for you, 1/3 for Chloe, 1/3 shared among us, he said smoothly. We sell the property together, divide the profit, and avoid years of stressful litigation. Everyone wins. Chloe looked at me earnestly. It makes sense, Mom. We don't need this huge place. We could sell, invest the money, travel. Dad's family would finally be on good terms again. Her hope hurt worse than their greed. Your father didn't leave this property to be divided, I said quietly. He left it to me. Out of guilt, Marcus replied, unruffled. He was not thinking clearly in those final years. A neurologist could easily argue that. My jaw tightened. David was rational and coherent until the end. And your family unity seems very selectively timed with the resort project. Isaiah finally spoke, his voice softer than his brother's but no less sharp. If he was so clear-minded, why did he hide everything from his own wife and daughter, he asked. Why the secrecy? Why the delayed letter? Chloe winced. They had pressed on that wound too. Mom, you have to admit it's weird, she said. What else didn't he tell us? Maybe he really wasn't in his right mind. Before I could answer, Ms. Jackson appeared in the doorway, concerned on her face. Everything all right, Mrs. Sterling? She asked. We're having a family discussion, Marcus snapped. Private. Ms. Jackson works for me, I said. She's staying. Her employment status is part of the disputed estate, Elijah interjected. We may need to re-evaluate staff contracts depending on how ownership is clarified. That was enough. I think this conversation is over, I said, spine straightening. You're all leaving now. You're not even going to consider our offer? Chloe demanded, hurt and frustration warring on her face. I'll study any proposal with my own lawyer, I replied. But I will not be cornered in my own home. Marcus's pleasant mask cracked for the first time. Naomi, this property is worth tens of millions combined with the resort expansion. You're a professor on a salary. We have decades of business experience and resources. We will get our share, one way or another. Is that a threat? I asked calmly. It's a reality check, he answered. David put you in an impossible position. We're offering support. I thought of the war room David had hinted at in his files, the years of careful planning, the blue folder that had already saved me once. I think my husband knew exactly what he was doing, I said quietly. Now all of you please leave my house. I turned to Chloe, gentler. You can stay, I added. This is your home too. She hesitated, then shook her head. I'm going with them, she said. We still have things to talk about. Please don't shut this down without thinking, Mom. She kissed my cheek and walked out with them, suddenly looking very small between three tall men. When the cars disappeared, the silence felt heavier than before. Mrs. Sterling, Ms. Jackson said softly after a moment, there's something your husband asked me not to mention unless it became urgent. Feels urgent, I muttered. What is it? Not here, she said, glancing at the walls like they might be listening. Come with me. She led me past the conservatory toward an old wooden shed that looked like it belonged to the previous century. Unlike the gleaming main house, it was deliberately shabby. Inside, dust and spiderwebs touched everything. Gardening tools leaned against the walls. Ms. Jackson went straight to the back corner and moved a stack of boxes, revealing a square of metal set into the concrete. "Your husband installed this last winter," she explained, unlocking a hidden latch. "The crew thought they were building a wine cellar." She pulled the door up. A ladder vanished into the dark. My pulse quickened. "After you," she said. The ladder led to a narrow concrete corridor. At the end of it, she flipped a switch and lights hummed on. We stepped into a windowless room that looked like a cross between an archive and a strategy office. Filing cabinets lined the walls. Large maps were pinned up, marked with notes and colored lines. On a central table sat computer equipment, binders, and stacked folders. "This is where your husband did his real work," Ms. Jackson said quietly. "He called it the vault. I call it genius." I moved toward a wall map. Our property was outlined in bold. Several other parcels in the area were marked in red. Across the bottom was stamped, "Summit Resorts, full expansion phases, internal." "I don't understand," I said. "I thought the resort was just a small luxury hotel nearby." "That's what they told the public," she said. 2 years ago, David hired a consultant to dig deeper. This is the full plan, 3 times the size of the official version." She pointed to a red-shaded area stretching behind Crestwood. "Phase 2 includes a golf course and villas. They've already bought most of the land they need. The only piece they haven't secured is ours." A slow understanding settled over me. "So, this house isn't just valuable. It's a bottleneck," I murmured. "Exactly. Without Crestwood, their expansion loses huge profit potential. Your husband confirmed it with multiple experts. But if they find out you know that, they'll fight even harder." She opened a cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. "And then there's this." Inside was a decade's worth of paperwork. Bank statements, email printouts, signed affidavits, tax records, investment contracts. I didn't understand every detail, but the pattern was obvious. The brothers had cut corners, moved money, and bent laws so often it had become a way of life. "David collected all of this?" I whispered. "Over years," she confirmed. "After they cheated him out of his inheritance and nearly ruined his name. He decided if they ever came back for this house, he'd be ready." It was both ruthless and heartbreakingly sad. "I don't want to become a monster to beat monsters," I said slowly. "You don't have to," Ms. Jackson replied. "But it helps to know what kind of people you're up against. More importantly, it gives you options." On the table, a framed photo caught my eye. A teenage David holding a prize-winning orchid, grin wide and hopeful. Behind him, 2 older boys stood with forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "That was the only thing he was proud of back then," she said softly. "They smashed it while he was away at school. He never forgot." Pieces clicked into place. His determination to support my love of orchids and art, his insistence that I have a space fully my own, the way he'd rebuilt the house that had once represented pain. "This isn't just a property," I said slowly. "This is him rewriting the story." "And passing the pen to you," Ms. Jackson added. I took a deep breath. "Does the laptop work down here?" I asked. "There's a secure network throughout," she said. He wanted to be able to work from anywhere on the grounds. "Good," I replied. "I need to watch ahead. Not just today's message." She raised an eyebrow. "You're going to cheat on the schedule," she teased. "I'm going to prepare," I corrected. "Then we're going to set up 3 meetings. One with my daughter, one with a new attorney, and one with the CEO of Summit Resorts." She looked at me with something like pride. "You sound like your husband," she said. "I sound like myself," I answered, surprising us both. The version he clearly believed I could be. I spent that night in the vault, watching several days' worth of videos back to back. It felt like sitting across from David in some strange, timeless room while he laid out a complex puzzle he'd been working on for years. "They'll try to separate you and Chloe," he warned in one recording. Marcus will act like the charming uncle she never had. Elijah will speak in legal terms meant to intimidate you. Isaiah will watch quietly and report back. Don't fall for the performance. In another, he slid a set of documents into view. Internal memos from county offices, drafts of Summit's permit applications. Summit will want to keep Phase 2 quiet until they've secured all the land, he explained. If they know you understand the full scope, your negotiating position explodes. Don't show your cards too early. I didn't sleep, but as the hours passed, my anger slowly transformed into clarity. The next afternoon, I met Chloe at a cafe in the city, a neutral place, away from Crestwood's pull and her uncle's influence. She arrived late, eyes already narrowed. I don't have long, she said, sliding into the chair. Uncle Marcus is taking me to meet some investors. They want to help me set up my own portfolio. Of course they did. Chloe, I said quietly, do you remember that narrative theory course you loved? The one where you learned there are always at least two versions of the same story. This isn't one of your classes, Mom, she snapped. Dad's gone. You're treating his family like villains, and they've been nothing but nice to me. You've heard their version, I said gently. You haven't heard your father's. Her eyes flashed. He hid a terminal illness and a whole house from us. What else was he hiding? I slid a tablet across the table. He left something for you. For us, actually. Videos. A lot of them. This one is marked, for Chloe, when she's angry. Seems like good timing. She hesitated, then hit play. David's face filled the screen again, this time with that blend of affection and mischief he reserved for our daughter. Hey, kiddo, he said softly. If you're watching this, you're either furious with me or very close. And yes, you have a point. I should have told you I was sick. Chloe's fingers tightened around the device. But I need you to understand why, he continued. I didn't want your last years with me to be about hospital visits and countdowns. I wanted to laugh with you about your professors, argue about politics, complain about traffic like regular people. He exhaled. There's something else I never fully explained, he said. Why I cut ties with my brothers. He laid out the story in clinical detail. The forged documents, they're using his name on fraudulent papers while he was away at college, the threats when he discovered it, their determination to protect their own reputations at his expense. Chloe's face went pale. They didn't just disagree with me, he said. They betrayed me. I left and rebuilt my life from scratch. The only good thing that came out of that decision was you and your mother. He leaned closer to the camera. If my brothers are talking to you now, remember this. They are very gifted at sounding reasonable. They are less gifted at telling the truth when money is involved. The video was cut off. The cafe noise faded into a blur around us. Chloe swiped tears away roughly. He was protecting us, she whispered. All this time, I thought he was just cold about his family. He was trying to keep the mess away from our front door, I said softly. They lied to me, she said, anger rising. They're still lying. They told you the house is worth a fortune, I said. That part is true. They left out why it's worth even more than they realize. I showed her the resort maps from the vault and the notes David had left about Phase 2. They're trying to play regular chess, I said. Your father left us a full playbook for a different game. She stared at the documents, gears turning in that precise, analytical mind she'd inherited from him. What do you want to do? She asked finally. Fight smart, I answered. Not emotionally. Not just to win, but to protect what your father intended. A small, fierce smile tugged at her mouth. Then let's stop letting them use me as a pawn, she said. I'm in, Mom. We met with the attorney David had quietly lined up for us that evening. I spread out the evidence from the vault like I was presenting a thesis. Halfway through, the lawyer leaned back and studied me with new respect. Your husband said you were sharper than him, he remarked. I thought he was being sentimental. Now I see he was being accurate. I'm just motivated, I said. and very tired of being underestimated. 3 days later, the black SUV returned to Crestwood. This time, a second car followed, a sleek sedan carrying a man in an expensive suit. The brothers introduced him as Mr. Chen, CFO of Sterling Investments. They expected a fearful widow and a wavering daughter. Instead, they walked into a formal dining room converted into a boardroom. The table was laid with documents, not food. A projector screen had been lowered at one end. Chloe sat at my right, calm and composed. "Naomi," Marcus said, forced to smile in place. "Thank you for agreeing to talk terms. This is an opportunity for all of us to." "I agree," I said pleasantly. "Today is an opportunity." I clicked the remote. A detailed map of Crestwood flashed onto the screen, showing the full acreage. "This is the actual size of the property," I explained. "All 25 acres. Not the 10 acres your proposal conveniently mentioned." Elijah cleared his throat. "The western portion isn't usable," he said. "It's environmentally sensitive. We left it out to keep things simple." Another click overlaid the resort's complete plan onto the map, including the hidden golf course expansion. "That unusable land appears to be the key to Phase 2, I observed. "The Phase summit hasn't been announced yet." Mr. Chen sat up straighter, eyes narrowing as he took in the layout. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "From people who are better at paperwork than your brothers," I replied. Before he could respond, the side door opened. This time, it wasn't Ms. Jackson. A well-dressed man in his 50s walked in, flanked by my attorney and 2 other executives. "Apologies for the late arrival," he said. "I'm Alan Alston, CEO of Summit Resorts. Mrs. Sterling, thank you for the invitation." Marcus's chair scraped back. "What is this?" he demanded. "We were told we had exclusive rights to negotiate this property." "You were told that by my brothers," Chloe chimed in coolly. "Not by my mother. Or by the legal owner of Crestwood." My lawyer slid thick envelopes to each person at the table. "Inside," he said, "you'll find documentation of previous financial conduct involving the Sterling siblings, conduct that would severely damage their credibility in any legal dispute or business negotiation if it were made public." Elijah skimmed a few pages, color draining from his face. "These are ancient history," he muttered. "Family disagreements. They have no bearing on." "They have bearing on your habit of lying when convenient," I cut in. "They also show a pattern of fraud that will interest regulators if you force my hand." The room went very quiet. "What do you want?" Marcus asked, bravado evaporating. "Simple," I said. "You drop every challenge to my ownership of Crestwood. You end all direct contact with my daughter. You stay off this property unless invited. In return, these documents remain where they are now, in a locked cabinet." "And if we refuse?" Elijah asked, though his voice lacked conviction. "Then we stop talking privately," my lawyer replied, "and start talking with the IRS and state authorities." Mr. Chen stood suddenly. "I believe I have been misled about the brothers' authority to negotiate here," he said stiffly. "Mrs. Sterling, I will contact you separately if I need to discuss financial matters. As for you 3, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. His disgust said enough. He walked out. Mr. Alston remained. "For what it's worth," he said, "Summit has no interest in becoming entangled in your family's history. We're interested in a transparent business arrangement with the actual owner of the property." "As it happens," I said, "I'm interested in that too. On certain conditions." The discussion that followed focused not on how to divide my land, but on how to protect it. I insisted on conservation easements, building limits, and guaranteed preservation of the conservatory and studio. We talked about royalties instead of a one-time payout, about walking trails instead of more parking lots. When the brothers finally signed the agreement formally relinquishing any claim, their signatures trembled just enough to be satisfying. As their SUV disappeared down the drive for what I hoped would be the last time, Chloe let out a long breath. Dad would have loved that, she said. Watching you wipe the floor with them. He set the stage, I replied, glancing toward the vault. I just finished the scene. The weeks after the confrontation blurred into a new kind of work. There were lawyers to meet, engineers and environmental consultants to interview, endless documents to review. Summit's team came out to walk the land with us. I learned more about zoning regulations in a month than I'd ever wanted to know. But beneath all the practical tasks, something gentler unfolded. Chloe stayed at Crestwood most nights, splitting her time between virtual classes and helping Ms. Jackson in the conservatory. Each morning, we watched David's daily video together. He spoke to us about insurance decisions, emotional landmines, even little memories he'd never shared, like the first time he heard me laugh in the university cafeteria. Gradually, grief shifted from raw pain to something more textured. It didn't fade exactly, but it stopped being the only thing I could feel. One crisp afternoon, Chloe appeared in the studio doorway, laptop in hand. Today's video is different, she said quietly. It's labeled, for the day Naomi picks up a brush again. I think he meant it for you alone. My throat tightened. I'll watch it, I promised. After she left, I stood in front of the easel. A half-finished painting waited there, my first serious attempt in more than a decade. I'd been working from one of the orchids, trying to capture its impossible blue. For a moment, I hesitated, then opened the laptop and pressed play. The studio looked bare behind David on the screen. No easels, no paint, just empty space and light. If you're watching this, he began, it means you've found your way back here. To yourself. He smiled at the blank walls around him. I've been thinking a lot about what we leave behind, he said. Not just money or buildings. Possibility. Who we make space for our loved ones to become. His hand swept out, gesturing, as if he could see the brushes and canvases that now filled the room. I built this place for you, he said. Not to trap you, but to free you. The conservatory, the studio, the financial safety net, they're just tools. What you choose to create with them, that's your story, not mine. He leaned closer. In the closet behind you, there's a large blank canvas I ordered years ago, he added. If you haven't already found it, you will. When you're ready, really ready, I hope you'll paint something on it that belongs to this house and to you. Only you'll know when that time has come. The video ended with his familiar farewell. Until tomorrow. I sat for a long time in the quiet studio, absorbing his words. Then I went to the back closet. The oversized canvas waited there, neatly wrapped. With Ms. Jackson's help, we installed it in the great room on a central wall that dominated the space. It took weeks to start. I filled sketchbooks with ideas. Landscapes, portraits, symbols. Nothing felt right. Crestwood wasn't just land or stone. It was memory layered on memory. David's childhood, his return, his final gift, my own rebirth. One morning, as I watched Chloe mist orchids in the conservatory, something clicked. I began to paint. Not a straightforward landscape, but a tapestry of time. At the base, I suggested the land as it once was, wild, untouched forest. Above that, faint images of an older version of the house, worn and neglected. Over that, crisp lines of the current Crestwood, bright windows, restored stone, the conservatory glowing like a glass heart. In the foreground, I added 3 figures, not in sharp detail but as silhouettes woven into the scene. A woman, a younger woman beside her, and behind them, a man holding a blue orchid as if offering it forward. I worked in long stretches, losing track of time, the way I used to in college. Sometimes I cried while I painted. Sometimes I caught myself smiling. When I finally stepped back, days later, sweaty and paint-stained, Chloe stood beside me, hand over her mouth. It's us, she whispered. And him. And this place. All at once. Past, present, possible future, I said simply. We hung the painting together. The house felt different afterward. More anchored, somehow. Not just David's project anymore, but a collaboration. Life settled into a new rhythm. The deal with Summit moved forward on our terms. Parts of the western land would eventually host carefully designed trails and a limited number of eco-friendly cabins. The core of the estate, the house, studio, and conservatory, would remain untouched. We negotiated profit-sharing arrangements instead of a flat sale. For the first time in my life, money wasn't something to worry about, but a tool I could direct deliberately. Months later, on a rainy afternoon, the doorbell rang. Ms. Jackson appeared in the studio doorway again, expression uneasy. "Marcus is here," she said. "He's alone. No papers. No entourage." My first instinct was to refuse him. Then I remembered David's face in the videos when he talked about his brothers, not with hatred, but with complicated sorrow. "I'll see him," I said. "On the porch." He looked older when I opened the door. Thinner. Whatever polished arrogance he'd worn before had been scraped away. "Naomi," he said quietly. "Thank you for agreeing to talk to me." "Our agreement was pretty final," I replied. "What do you need?" "I'm not here to renegotiate," he said. "That ship sailed. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I raised an eyebrow. "For which part?" "For trying to erase David from the story he wrote here," he said. "For years of treating him like a spare brother. For trying to use his child as leverage. Take your pick." He swallowed hard. "I've been sick," he added bluntly. "Cancer. The prognosis isn't good. It changes the way you look at what you leave behind." Pain flickered in my chest, unexpectedly. "I'm sorry," I said honestly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small packet. "I found this going through our father's things," he said. "Thought maybe you or Chloe might want it." Inside was a faded photograph. 3 boys under a large tree, 2 older, 1 younger. The smallest clutched a tiny orchid in a clay pot, beaming like he'd won the world. "That was the first plant David ever grew," Marcus said, voice rough. "Before everything went wrong." I looked at the picture, then at him. "Would you like to see what he grew at the end?" I asked, surprising both of us. "The orchids. The house he turned this into." He hesitated, then nodded. We walked through the conservatory in silence. At the center, the blue orchid glowed under the filtered light. Marcus stopped in front of it, eyes damp. "He always cared about fragile things," he murmured, "even when the rest of us were smashing them." Forgiveness didn't erase what he'd done. It didn't fix David's lost years or undo the almost theft of Crestwood. But in that moment, standing under the glass roof while rain tapped above us, I chose to let go of a piece of the anger. Not for his sake, but for mine. After he left, the property felt lighter somehow, as if a final knot had loosened. That night, I watched David's last recorded message. He appeared on the screen in the study, looking directly into the camera with a softness that felt like a hand on my cheek. "If you've made it here," he said, "we've spent a year together in these little windows. You've heard my explanations, my worries, my hopes for you and Chloe. This is the last one." He smiled faintly. "I can't walk with you into everything that comes next," he said. "But I don't need to. You're stronger than you think. You always were. I had to leave for you to see it clearly." He glanced toward the side, as if looking at the painting that didn't exist yet. "This house terrified me when I was a boy," he admitted. "It held everything I hated. Coming back was the scariest decision I ever made. But turning it into something beautiful for you, that became my way of making peace with my past." He looked back into the lens. "I turned my old prison into your door," he said. "What you step into now is yours alone to decide." His smile deepened. "So this is goodbye to the daily videos," he concluded. "But not goodbye to us. We'll keep existing in Chloe's stubbornness, in the orchids you'll fuss over, in the paintings you'll make, and the choices you'll take your time with instead of rushing." He gave the camera one last look full of love. "Until someday, Naomi." The screen went dark. I sat in the quiet house that had once been the source of my husband's nightmares and was now the center of my new life. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, the great room light reflected off the surface of my painting. Past, present, and future woven together. David had left me more than a deed and a few $1 million worth of land. He had left me proof that I was capable of far more than simply enduring. He'd turned a secret house into a sanctuary where I could rediscover the parts of myself I'd put away for decades. Crestwood was no longer the place he feared. It was the place he remade in love and placed in my hands. And now, one day at a time, it was my turn to decide what story would be told here next.